This is Radar for On the Radar Entertainment Blog, coming to another edition of movie reviews and observations. So, the issue is, I did watch some good movies, and this is episode 55. It's a problem is not all of them were actually that great. So the first movie I watched called Glock, and I'm saying, okay, so I knew that's who Stephen Moyer was because he was in The Gifted as the Father, and that was a pretty darn good TV show. But the problem is the idea of the people having to go migrate to another planet, and then once they're there, the government on that planet doesn't want more people to show up, and he's trying his best to go over there after a tragedy happens on the planet with his family. And what the issue that becomes is he's trying to survive, and he meets somebody who's from that planet. He thinks that from the new colony on Earth, and do they want to get along, yada yada. And the two of them have to bond together to get along, and they have like a little AI that's their friend that his daughter made. It was pretty nice. But then the idea of them traveling through a gate that transports them to different parts of the galaxy, different parts of the world. And I'm saying to myself, they kind of stole that from their sci-fi show Stargate. So overall, for a movie that is barely 90 minutes and has science fiction and fighting scenes and action and actor I've seen before, it wasn't bad. I just didn't know he was British because I only remember from the show Gifted. So overall, it wasn't a bad movie. There's a reason why probably Skokie Public Library doesn't own the movie and I had to get it from somewhere else. Because it's an okay rental, you know. It's not one you go to theaters and see. Then I saw the movie Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. Let's say that again. Sometimes, always. Never, rarely, sometimes, always. And this movie was barely an hour and 40 minutes. But the problem with this movie was that when watching this movie, I thought it could be played in the 70s, 80s, or even 90s or 2000s. Because it seemed like these girls had no other choice but to go to another state to get an abortion. And I didn't think they had like cell phones or anything. But then they pull out their smartphones. And I'm like, so it takes present day. And they're working at like a grocery store, her and her cousin. It looks like it's like 30 years old. And they can't go anywhere to do it, blah, blah, blah. And it's about her trying to get this thing done with. And it was okay, but it dragged on. And the movie seemed like it took place, as I said, in the past, not presently. So there's just scenes and things that didn't make the most sense. So overall, it was okay, but it wasn't that great. So I don't get how it's certified fresh. It's okay. It's just not the best movie. Then I watched another movie from the Interloan Library, and it's in the long line of Scott Adkins' movie, where he's an action star. And some of his movies are very cliche action films, but he's not someone who's done a lot of these good action films, learns the fighting moves, and it looks pretty real. But the problem is with this is I like that it was short. It was very good, and it was typical action. Him being a former asset in the like the MI6 or like the military, and he's got all these skills. And I'm saying to myself, that's cool. He does a very, very, very good job at that. But the issue that I do have is that the movie is he's retired. He's living in Mexico. Him and his son, his wife died through mysterious circumstances. A lot of movies are like that. And the thing is that some guy kidnaps his son and goes, you have to do this and this for me. So it's basically like it's like they're taking off the movie Taken, like they're stealing that idea that somebody stole his daughters and he's a man with a bunch of skill. This time, in order to get his son back, he has to do a bunch of killings and stuff. And it's this black guy who is hiding among a Mexican cartel and wants him to kill other Mexican cartel. And then his former bosses are involved, and it's just like, why would his former bosses be okay with their asset being used without it actually being for them and some other guy? And this black guy is just saying Hispanic words. He's, of course, dating a Hispanic woman, so it's kind of like, yep, I run this area, blah, blah, blah. So it was like, okay. But overall, it was probably the best movie I saw because I knew going into it it's going to be a good action movie. Scott Adkins is an amazing actor in action movies, and it was not bad, and it wasn't that long. Then I watched the horror film Don't Look Back, and I'm going to let you know, I kind of fell asleep through some of it because I was tired. Not because it was a bad movie. It was just, they start off the movie with her father dying, and she's got to live with that, and she's seeing hallucinations. Then the whole turn of the movie was making a political stance of when somebody's being attacked or injured in the park or anywhere in public, instead of actually calling for help or going to help, they go and film it. And it was all about the people that had witnessed this, that this guy died, and that they all miraculously are dying by accidental deaths or suicide, and they're trying to figure out what happens here. And the cops don't believe them, blah, blah, blah. And the only part of the thing was very short. But pretty much, you add the hallucinations and her father dying to what already was convoluted plot trying to make a political statement. It was just not a very good movie. Don't Look Back. Yeah. The crow was everywhere. Okay, it's symbols. But yeah, overall, for the 97% of this movie, almost 95%, maybe 98% of the movie, it's not worth your time. Then I watched the movie The Place of No Words. And I'm saying to myself, okay, so it's about a little girl asking at 3 years old, how do people die, and dealing with that and stuff like that. Like, where do we go? And I'm like, okay, so it's 97 minutes. And the back of this movie, by the people that made the vendor for the library, goes, fantasy. It was definitely a fantasy movie. It was not a drama. But, yes, there were fantasy scenes of her father and her mother doing different things and her going on. But the movie moves so slowly. There was barely any dialogue for a lot of the movie. And when they were talking, it was pretty darn boring. It felt like it was longer than 90 minutes. It felt like I was watching a 2-hour movie. Silent movie for most of the part where there's not much talking. When there is, it's just not that great. And I would consider it more as a bad drama or really bad fantasies type of movie. Yeah, so don't watch The Place of No Words. That, I don't get how people like that. Then I watched The Last Shift. And Richard Jenkins, I just saw him last week in the movie Kajillionaire, which I felt like dragged on and wasn't that great. I watched the movie The Last Shift. And you know what? It was pretty funny, but I wouldn't consider it a comedy. I'd call it drama more than anything else. This dude spent his life working at the same restaurant for a year. He's got to train some new guy, and essentially, his whole goal is he's going to move to Florida to be with his mother, and things go awry, and it's just about the relationship the two of them have. And there wasn't that much resolution. I know they're trying to get this emotional attachment between an old white guy and a young black kid. It didn't really stick, and in the 87 minutes, it seemed like the movie just ended abruptly. There wasn't real character development, no final resolution. There was nothing, no climax. It was just, okay, this guy did this his whole entire life. Something bad happened to him. Then he tried to move on, and that screwed up, and then he's back to where he is. They're just like, yeah, it was just a waste of time, And yeah, so overall, it was like, okay, so some of the actors in the movie I've seen before, but in general, I'm like, not so great. And then the last movie I watched, because I was planning on watching a longer movie, but something came up today, I watched the New Mutants movie. And the library listed it as science fiction because X-Men are mutants, so that's fiction. And all the other X-Men movies would be fiction, science fiction, but I put them in action because they may have superpowers, but it's an action movie. And this movie turned into be a soap opera. It's about one girl who doesn't look Native American, and her father, who was a detective in season 1 of Nancy Drew. People died in her town because of something she did. And so did this boy in his town, people died. And then same thing with this guy. And then Macy Williams' character and her problems. And then Anna Taylor-Joy, I did not say her name right. Anna Taylor-Joy, who everybody likes from the Queen's Game and other stuff, she's playing somebody from another country. And they're trying to get they got two characters, two foreigners, in terms of somebody from Argentina, maybe from Brazil, and then somebody from Europe. Then there's got British actors, American actors, so they make it very diverse. And they also made it where Macy Williams' character and the other character in the movie kiss and they're in a relationship. And I'm like, okay, throw that in there. So it felt like a soap opera because everybody got all their problems and they're speaking to a doctor who's helping them with their mutant powers. And they're all just speaking about their trouble and trying to fix what's going on. And they didn't do a really good job of explaining why they're in that place, where the X-Men are, where, the Magneto's crew, all that type of stuff, the Brotherhood of Evil, all these things, where Mystique recruits people. I'm wondering what's going on, who's she working for. They don't really go into that. They don't really explain that much what's going on, why they're there, who's going on, and she's the only one controlling all of them, which is kind of silly. And it turned into a horror film because then they realize they can't escape, but then the woman's lying to them, and they're all trying to get out, and something's attacking them, spirits or something, and they're all just trapped and they can't get out. It's like a horror film. Who's going to survive? What's going to happen? This lady's holding against their will. Things are happening to them. So it was mostly soap opera-ish and then horror film. So I don't get how it's science fiction whatsoever. And the people who made this movie from 20th Century Fox, your last X-Men movie, you did a horrible job. This was really, really bad. I don't get why you made this in the first place. And, they got, let's get Macy Williams from her stuff. And let's get Anna Taylor-Joy from her thing. And, let's see what happens here and try to put this movie together, make it diverse, and all that whatnot. And the only positive thing, though, it was 90-something minutes. There was no posting credits. There was nothing. So that's the only positive. So do not watch the New Mutants. It was definitely worse than I thought it was going to be. It really, really let me down. And Last Shift, and, never really, sometimes, always, I don't understand how people can say how great it was, nor the place of no words. They were just crap. And, of course, Don't Look Back was one of the worst horror films I've ever seen. So what it really comes down to is the Seized movie with Scott Adkins, where it's similar to Taken in a bit, was actually the best movie I watched this week. And Glock, even though they stole elements from Stargate franchise, and they've done this where the humans have moved to other planets, it's funny, the two movies from Interlone Library were the best movies that I actually watched this week. So thanks for listening to another edition of Movie Reviews and Observations, number 55. For On the Radar Entertainment Blog, I'm Radar. See you guys next time.